My 14-year-old son destroyed his father's wedding cake in front of 126 guests, and I'm so proud of him. The call came from a police officer whose name I forgot the second he said my son's name. Ms. Bennett, there was an incident at the Mercer wedding. Your son knocked over the cake table and had a physical confrontation with the bride. Your daughter was transported to St. Anne's. I was standing in the medication room at the emergency department where I worked, halfway through counting syringes. For a few seconds, I couldn't understand why Sophie had been taken to a hospital if Evan was the one who had supposedly attacked someone. Is my daughter conscious? Yes, ma'am. She is stable. And my son, the officer paused. He's with venue security. He isn't under arrest at this time. At this time. Those 3 words followed me for the entire 90-minute drive. My ex-husband Grant had the children for the wedding week. I hadn't been invited, which was fine with me. His new wife, Danielle, had made it clear that my presence would make the day uncomfortable. I had traded shifts so I could be off the following morning when the children came home. Instead, I drove through a thunderstorm in my blue scrubs while my phone kept lighting up on the passenger seat. Grant called 6 times, his mother called twice. A number I didn't recognize left a voicemail telling me I had raised a dangerous boy. Then a video arrived from Grant's sister. I pulled into a gas station before I watched it. The clip was 12 seconds long. It showed Danielle in her white wedding dress beside a 5-tier cake. Evan rushed into the frame, knocked a plate out of Sophie's hand, and shoved past Danielle. The cake stand tipped. White frosting, flowers, and broken plates crashed across the floor while guests screamed. The video ended with Danielle grabbing her wrist and Evan dropping to his knees beside Sophie. It looked terrible. Evan had never been a violent child. He was the kind of boy who moved worms off the sidewalk after it rained. When he was 11, he quit a youth boxing program after accidentally giving another boy a bloody nose during practice. But the boy in that video looked wild. He didn't hesitate. He didn't look sorry. I watched it 3 times, hoping I had missed something. I hadn't. When I reached St. Anne's, Grant was waiting outside the pediatric observation unit in his tuxedo. His tie was gone. There was dried white frosting on one sleeve and a red mark across his neck where his collar had rubbed the skin. Finally, he said, "You need to talk to him before Danielle presses charges." "Where is Sophie?" "She's stable. They gave her medication in the ambulance." "What medication?" "I don't know. The allergy stuff." I stared at him. Our daughter had carried an epinephrine auto-injector since she was 5. Grant had attended the allergist appointments. He had practiced with the trainer pen at least 4 times. Yet he stood in a hospital hallway after her wedding day emergency and called it the allergy stuff. "Where is Ivan?" I asked. Security brought him over. "He's in a family room with a police officer. My parents are there. Danielle's here too." "Why is Danielle in the same room as him if she says he attacked her?" Grant looked irritated, as if I had chosen the wrong problem. "Because everyone is trying to figure out what happened." The family room felt less like a place to figure out the truth, and more like a courtroom that had already reached a verdict. Grant's parents sat against one wall. His sister, Nicole, stood beside the window with her arms folded. Danielle sat in a wheelchair even there wasn't anything wrong with her legs. Someone had draped a hospital blanket over the front of her ruined dress. A purple bruise was beginning to show around her wrist. Her mother stood behind her, rubbing her shoulders. Evan sat alone in a plastic chair near the door. His dress shirt was covered in frosting. His right palm had a shallow cut, probably from a broken plate. His hair was wet with sweat, and his face looked gray. On the table beside him lay an empty epinephrine auto-injector in a clear medical bag. That was the first thing in the room that didn't match the video. Danielle started crying the moment she saw me. "Mara, I tried so hard with him. I included him in everything. He destroyed the cake, he shoved me, and then he screamed that I was trying to kill Sophie. In front of my entire family." "I didn't shove you," Evan said. His voice was quiet. Danielle held up her wrist. "Then how did this happen?" "You grabbed me. Because you were destroying our wedding." Grant's mother leaned forward. "He has been cold to Danielle for months. We all saw it. This wasn't about cake." The officer near the door glanced at me. He looked tired and uncomfortable. "Has anyone spoken to the children separately?" I asked. No one answered. "Has anyone asked Sophie what happened?" Danielle's mother made a sound of disbelief. "She's 8. She was frightened because her brother went insane." Evan stood so quickly that the chair scraped backward. "She was frightened because she couldn't breathe." Grant told him to sit down. Evan did, but he kept looking at me. "Mom asked the doctor what she ate." Danielle wiped under her eyes, careful not to smear her makeup. "He keeps doing this. He is trying to turn an accident into something evil." "Then an accident should be easy to explain," I said. I asked the officer if I could speak to my son alone. He agreed immediately. Grant objected, but the officer led everyone else into the hallway. The moment the door closed, Evan folded forward. His hands began to shake. "I didn't see the sign until she'd already taken a bite," he said. "I should have checked first. I always check first." "Slow down. What sign?" "The dessert card. It said almond praline filling." Sophie had frosting on her mouth, and she said her tongue felt fuzzy. Then she started coughing. "Did you use the pen?" He nodded toward the medical bag. "The one from my backpack." Danielle took Sophie's purse before the pictures because she said the pen made it bulky. I kept the spare. My stomach tightened. Where did she put Sophie's pen? In the bridal suite. In her makeup case. Did you tell your dad? He was taking pictures. I told Uncle Ryan, but he said the spare was close enough. Even pressed his palms into his eyes. Sophie only had one bite. I knocked the plate away, but Danielle grabbed my arm. She kept saying I was making a scene. I pulled away and my hip hit the table. I didn't mean to knock the cake over. Did you touch Danielle other than pulling away? No, I swear. Why would the cake have almond filling if everyone knew about Sophie's allergy? That was when Avon looked up. Because Danielle wanted it. He said it like he had been waiting months for someone to ask the right question. She told Sophie the wedding wasn't going to revolve around her medical drama. She said there would be something safe for her, but this morning she told her maybe it was time to stop being scared of food. I felt a cold pressure spread through my chest. When did she say that? In the bridal suite. Before pictures. Who else heard? I did. Maybe one of the bridesmaids. I don't know. Music was playing. Everybody was moving around. There was a knock on the door. A pediatric resident stepped in and asked if I was Sophie's mother. I followed her down the hall. Sophie looked very small in the hospital bed. Her flower girl dress was folded over a chair. She wore a pale yellow gown and had an intravenous line taped to her hand. Red patches still covered part of her neck. She tried to smile when she saw me. The wedding got messed up, she whispered. I sat beside her and took her free hand. I don't care about the wedding, I care about you. The doctor explained that Sophie had experienced a serious allergic reaction involving her skin and respiratory system. Avon had given the epinephrine before the ambulance arrived. The paramedics gave additional medication and monitored her breathing. She would remain under observation because symptoms could return. Your son acted quickly, the doctor said. That mattered. Grant was standing in the doorway when she said it. He looked down at the floor. I asked Sophie if she felt able to tell me what happened. The doctor stayed in the room, and I made sure Grant remained by the door where she could see him. Sophie stared at the tape on her hand. Miss Danielle gave me the first piece because I was the flower girl. Did you know it had almonds? She shook her head. She said the outside was safe. Grant stepped into the room. Danielle gave it to you herself. Sophie nodded. She told the waiter to bring it to me. I said I thought I had a cupcake, and she said we weren't doing separate food because we're one family now. Grant's face changed. Not enough, not yet, but something moved behind his eyes. Did she say anything else? I asked. Sophie looked toward her father before answering. She said one bite wouldn't hurt me. Grant immediately shook his head. She wouldn't say that. Maybe you misunderstood. It was loud in there. Sophie pulled her hand away from mine and rolled onto her side. That small movement told me more about the past few months than any speech could have. I asked Grant to leave. He refused at first. Then the doctor told him Sophie needed rest, and he walked out without looking at either child. I found him in the hallway with Danielle. She had left the wheelchair. She stood barefoot, holding her ruined skirt above the floor while her mother argued with the officer. When Grant told her what Sophie said, Danielle didn't look surprised. She looked offended. I handed her cake at a wedding, she said. That isn't a crime. I was told the outer frosting was safe. If the bakery mixed something up, that is on them. You told me there was a separate cupcake, Grant said. There was supposed to be. Maybe the staff lost it. Sophie says you told her there wasn't one. Danielle looked past him at me. This is what Mara does. She turns every normal decision into a custody issue. The children know exactly what to say when she wants to make me look bad. I haven't spoken to them since Thursday. I said, you don't have to. Evan has been waiting to ruin this day. The officer asked Danielle if she still wanted to make a formal complaint about the alleged assault. She said yes. Grant closed his eyes. For 1 second, I thought he might finally tell her to stop. Instead, he asked if we could all wait until morning. That was Grant's answer to everything. Wait until everyone was calmer. Wait until after the rehearsal. Wait until after the wedding. Wait until the problem became so large that someone else had to solve it. The officer took statements but didn't arrest Evan. The venue had security cameras, and he wanted the full footage before deciding whether any physical assault had occurred. The hotel also had to document the destroyed cake and damaged table. I took Evan to sit with Sophie while I called my supervisor and told her I wouldn't be at work the next day. At 2 in the morning, after Sophie had finally fallen asleep, Evan came into the family waiting area and sat across from me. You're mad, he said. I'm. His face tightened. Not because you stopped her from eating the cake, I said. I'm mad that you thought you had to handle this alone. He stared at the vending machine behind me. Tried not to. What does that mean? I told Dad. More than once. He pulled his phone from his pocket, but he didn't show me secret pictures or some perfect recording that solved everything. He opened his calendar. There were small red dots beside 6 dates. What are those? Every time something happened with Sophie's allergy, I started marking them because Dad kept saying I remembered things wrong. The first date was 3 months before the wedding. That night, according to Evan, Danielle had cleared the kitchen counters because the medication cases looked ugly. She put one pen in a high cabinet and another in her locked bathroom drawer. Sophie couldn't reach either one. Avon found them while looking for a thermometer. He put the kitchen pen back in its marked emergency box and told Grant. Grant made Danielle apologize. Then he told Evan she was still learning. The second date was 2 weeks later. Danielle brought almond cookies home from a bakery and placed them beside the children's snacks, even moved them into a sealed container. Danielle accused him of treating her like she was stupid. Grant told both of them to stop fighting. The third date was the evening Sophie came home crying because Danielle had told a neighbor that her allergy was mostly anxiety. It's a girl. The fourth was when Danielle said they wouldn't choose the wedding cake around one child's restrictions. The fifth was when Evan asked about Sophie's separate dessert and Grant showed him an email from the bakery confirming a nut-free cupcake. The sixth red dot was the day before the wedding. What happened yesterday? I asked. Evan looked toward Sophie's room. Danielle told her not to mention the allergy at the reception. She said people had spent too much money to hear about medical problems. Sophie asked if she could keep the pen in her flower basket. Danielle said no because it would look ridiculous in pictures. Did your father hear that? I told him in the parking lot after rehearsal. What did he say? Evan swallowed. He said, please, just let me have one peaceful day. I sat there listening to the hum of the vending machine and the distant sound of a monitor alarm. I wanted to blame Grant for every red dot. He deserved that blame. But I also remembered 3 phone calls when Evan had sounded strange and I had accepted his answer that everything was fine. I remembered Sophie complaining that Danielle was weird about food, and I'd told her every house had different rules. I had been so determined not to become the jealous ex-wife that I had mistaken distance for maturity. Evan had been keeping a calendar because none of us had been keeping watch. Why didn't you show me this? I asked. Because you always say not to put you in the middle. The words hurt because they were true. I had said that whenever the children complained about ordinary differences between our homes, bedtimes, screen limits, chores, I meant that they shouldn't carry messages between divorced parents. What Evan heard was that he shouldn't bring me problems from his father's house. Before I could answer, Grant walked into the waiting area. He looked exhausted. Danielle's family is leaving, he said. They're talking about suing the hotel and the bakery. Evan kept a record of every time he warned you, I said. Grant stared at the phone on the table. He's turning normal disagreements into evidence now. Evan stood. Sophie went to the hospital. How normal does it have to get before you listen? Grant's expression hardened. Do not speak to me like that. Then stop making me be the adult. Evan walked back toward Sophie's room. Grant watched him leave, his jaw tight. Danielle thinks you coached him, he said to me. Of course she does. She says this is parental alienation. She says you've been encouraging them to reject her. Your daughter is lying in a hospital bed after eating a cake your wife handed her, and you're talking to me about Danielle's feelings. We don't know that Danielle knew what was in it. Then, help me find out. He didn't answer. At 7 the next morning, Danielle posted the 12-second video online. Her caption said my son had attacked her because he couldn't accept his father's new family. She wrote that she had spent a year trying to love children who had been taught to hate her. She thanked the guests who protected her and said she was praying for Evan to get the help he needed. She didn't mention Sophie. She didn't mention the ambulance. She didn't mention the empty injector sitting in an evidence bag. By 9, the video had been shared hundreds of times. By noon, strangers were calling Evan a future criminal. Someone found my public hospital profile and posted the name of my employer. A woman I had never met sent me a message saying nurses should know how to raise children without violence. Nicole, Grant's sister, texted me that Danielle was emotional and probably hadn't considered how the post would affect Evan. I asked Nicole to tell her to remove it. She replied that getting involved would only make things worse. That family had built an entire moral system around not getting involved. The hospital discharged Sophie late that afternoon with new prescriptions and strict instructions to keep 2 injectors accessible at all times. A hospital social worker spoke to each of us because the exposure might have involved an adult ignoring a known medical condition. Danielle refused to answer questions without an attorney. Grant said that sounded reasonable. The children came home with me. Grant objected in the hallway until the social worker reminded him that Sophie said her medication had been placed in a locked room at his wedding. There was no court order changing custody yet, but he finally agreed they should stay with me until we knew more. He made it sound like a favor. During the drive home, Sophie slept with her head against the window. Evan watched her reflection in the glass. Is she going to have another reaction? He asked every 15 minutes. The doctors think she's past the highest risk period. If anything changes, we go back. What if I fall asleep? Then I stay awake. He looked at me. You worked all night before the wedding. I'm still the parent. He turned back toward the window, but his shoulders dropped a little. At home, I put 1 injector in Sophie's bedroom pouch, 1 in the kitchen emergency box, and 1 in my purse. Evan followed me through the house checking each location. When I told him he didn't have to keep watch, he said he knew. Then he slept on the floor outside Sophie's room. The next morning, I called the hotel and asked them to preserve every camera angle from the ballroom. I called the bakery listed on the wedding program and left a message. I emailed Tessa Ward, the school nurse, asking for a copy of Sophie's current allergy action plan and the record showing who had received it. Then I called Alicia Moore, the attorney who had handled the last change to our parenting schedule. Alicia listened without interrupting. When I finished, she asked whether Grant had threatened to seek custody. He said Danielle thinks this is parental alienation. That isn't an answer. As if he had been waiting for her to ask, someone knocked on my front door. A process server stood on the porch with an envelope. Grant had filed for an emergency temporary order. The paperwork said I had encouraged Evan's hostility toward Danielle, failed to address escalating behavioral problems, and created an environment in which both children believed their father's home was unsafe. It asked the court to require supervised contact between me and the children until Evan completed a psychological evaluation. Attached to the filing were screenshots of Danielle's post, written statements from 3 wedding guests, and still frames from the 12-second video. There was one paragraph about Sophie's allergic reaction. It described the cause as currently disputed. I read that phrase until the words stopped looking real. Alicia asked me to photograph every page and send it to her. She told me not to respond to Grant, Danielle, or anyone in their families. The filing is aggressive, she said. That doesn't make it strong. We need records, not arguments. The hearing is in 3 days. Then we use the 3 days. The first useful record came from the school nurse. Tessa sent Sophie's medical action plan, signed by her allergist, me, Grant, and the school. It described the risk of anaphylaxis from tree nuts and directed any caregiver to give epinephrine at the first sign of a serious reaction, then call 911. She also sent an email chain from 6 weeks earlier. Danielle had asked whether Sophie's allergy was medically confirmed or primarily anxiety-based. Tessa replied that it was confirmed and that minimizing symptoms could cause a child to delay reporting a dangerous reaction. Grant had been copied on the exchange. Danielle replied, "Understood. We will follow the plan." I forwarded everything to Alicia. The hotel footage arrived next. The ballroom manager wouldn't release it directly to me, but she allowed the responding officer to review it. That afternoon, the officer called. "The angle is wide," he said, "but it shows the bride took hold of Evan's forearm first. He pulled away. I don't see him push or strike her. Her wrist appears to hit the edge of the cake stand when it falls." Is he being charged? Not with assault based on what I've. The hotel can still pursue property damage, but management hasn't decided whether it will. I sat down on my kitchen floor after the call. For the first time since the wedding, one part of the story had been settled by something no one could argue with. Avon hadn't attacked Danielle. But that didn't answer the larger question. Who changed the cake order? Jules Harper, the bakery owner, returned my call that evening. She sounded frightened before I even explained who I was. "I heard a child went to the hospital," she said. "Is she all right?" "She is home. She had anaphylaxis." Jules went silent. Then she said there was supposed to be a separate cupcake. She remembered Sophie because Grant and Danielle had attended a tasting 6 weeks before the wedding. Danielle loved an almond praline filling. Grant reminded her that his daughter had a severe almond allergy. Jules explained that her bakery couldn't guarantee that the main wedding cake was free from cross-contact if it contained almond filling. She recommended a sealed cupcake from a partner kitchen that handled allergy orders separately. Grant agreed immediately. The original invoice listed one individually packaged vanilla cupcake with a red allergy label. "So where was it?" I asked. "It was removed from the order." "By whom?" Jules hesitated. "The bride emailed us the week before the wedding. She said the child wouldn't be eating dessert after all. Do you still have the email?" "Yes, we keep all order changes for a year." I closed my eyes. "Please don't delete anything. My attorney will contact you tonight." Jules agreed. Before hanging up, she said something that stayed with me. "We put an ingredient card beside the cake because of that conversation. Almond praline was printed in bold. I thought the child wouldn't be served." At the emergency hearing 3 days later, Grant sat beside Danielle and her attorney. Danielle wore a soft gray dress and a brace around her wrist. She looked nothing like the furious bride from the hospital. She kept her eyes down while Grant's attorney argued that Evan's behavior had been escalating for months. Their evidence was mostly opinion. Grant's mother said Evan had refused to smile in family photographs. Nicole said he had skipped 2 wedding planning dinners. A groomsman said Evan looked angry before the cake cutting. Then they played the 12-second video. Even knowing what happened, I felt sick watching it on a large screen. The clip ended at the exact moment the cake fell. No one watching it would know that Evan reached for an injector 2 seconds later. Alicia presented the hospital report, the school medical plan, and the officer's summary of the venue footage. She showed that Evan had administered the medication correctly and that Danielle grabbed him first. Then she presented the original bakery invoice and the email canceling Sophie's safe cupcake. Danielle's attorney didn't deny she sent it. He said she believed Sophie could simply skip dessert. He argued that a server made an unfortunate mistake by handing her the main cake. The judge asked why Danielle had told the school nurse that she would follow the medical plan. Danielle said she had followed it. She claimed she never saw Sophie eat the cake and never instructed anyone to serve her. "I was the bride," she said. "There were more than 100 guests. I couldn't monitor every plate. That was the gap in our evidence." Sophie said Danielle ordered the server to bring her the cake. Avon said he heard Danielle talking about proving the allergy was exaggerated. Danielle said both children were repeating their mother's suspicions. The judge refused Grant's request to supervise my contact. He also refused to return the children to Grant's home immediately. He ordered that the children remain with me for 2 weeks while a guardian ad litem reviewed the medical records and interviewed the family. Grant received daytime visits at his parents' home, but Danielle couldn't attend. It wasn't a final victory, it was a pause. Outside the courthouse, Danielle walked directly toward a row of local reporters who had found the case through her social media post. Her attorney stopped her before she reached them. Grant didn't look at me. He looked at Evan. "I hope you're happy," he said. Evan went completely still. I stepped between them. "Your daughter went to the hospital. Your son saved her. If you need someone to blame for the courthouse, start with the adult who canceled the safe food." Grant's face reddened. Danielle said Sophie wasn't going to have dessert. That isn't the same as giving her almonds. Then why did Sophie get the first piece? I don't know. That is the problem. You keep using "I don't know" like it means you had no responsibility to find out. He walked away. In the car, Evan stared straight ahead. "He thinks I did this to him," he said. "Your father is wrong. He got married and 3 hours later we were in an ambulance. That isn't because you knocked over a cake. If I had checked the card sooner." "Stop." He flinched. I softened my voice. "You are 14. You weren't the caterer, the parent, the nurse, or the person who ordered the food. You reacted when Sophie needed you. Everything before that belonged to the adults. But none of the adults did anything. I had no answer that could make that less true." The next week was quieter in public and worse inside our house. Sophie refused to eat anything unless Evan tasted it first. Evan started reading ingredient labels 3 or 4 times. At night, he woke whenever she coughed. I found him sitting beside her bed at 2 in the morning with the spare injector in his hand. I arranged therapy for both children. Evan refused to speak during the first session. Sophie spent most of hers drawing a wedding cake with a large black line through it. At school, another student called Evan the cake psycho. Someone played Danielle's video during lunch. The assistant principal removed it from one student's phone, but by then everyone had seen it. The full venue video wasn't public. Medical records couldn't be posted. The lie traveled in 12 seconds while the truth sat inside folders. Danielle removed her original post on Alicia's advice, but copies continued to spread. Then her attorney sent a settlement proposal. Danielle would agree not to pursue a civil claim for the cake or her wrist if I agreed to 3 things. The children would attend family therapy with her, Evan would make a written apology, and neither child would discuss the wedding online or with the press. Alicia read the proposal aloud in her office. "They want a 14-year-old to apologize before the evidence review is finished," she said. "We're not signing it." "I know." She folded the papers and put them back in the envelope. "But this tells me they're worried about something." The bakery emails arrived the same afternoon. Most were ordinary order details: delivery time, flower colors, the number of tiers. Then I reached the message canceling Sophie's cupcake. Jules had written, "Because the main cake contains almond praline and is produced in a kitchen that handles tree nuts, we strongly recommend keeping the individually sealed allergy-safe option." Danielle replied, "Please remove it. We are trying to make the day feel unified, and separate food creates unnecessary attention. She can have fruit if needed." Jules wrote back, "Please confirm the child will not be served the wedding cake." Danielle answered with one word, "Confirmed." That email proved she knew Sophie couldn't eat the cake. It still didn't prove she told the server to give it to her. Grant called that night. Under Alicia's instructions, I put him on speaker and told him I was recording the conversation. He agreed. "I saw the bakery emails," he said. "Good." Danielle says she canceled the cupcake because Sophie told her she didn't want dessert. Sophie was coloring at the table. Her crayon stopped moving. "I never said that," she whispered. Grant heard her. "Sweetheart, maybe you don't remember. It was a busy week." Sophie dropped the crayon. "I remember because she said if I asked for special food, Grandma Mercer would think Mom trained me to be difficult." Grant breathed into the phone without speaking. "Did Danielle say that to you?" I asked. "No." That wasn't my question. I don't know what Danielle said every minute of the week. Evan walked into the kitchen. "I told you she was doing this," he said. "This call is supposed to be about arranging my visit." Grant replied. "No, Dad. Every call is supposed to be about arranging things so you never have to answer." Grant hung up. 2 days later, Ben Ortiz, the wedding photographer, called me. He said he had something we needed to hear. Ben had been hired to produce both photographs and a short wedding film. Grant wore a small microphone inside his jacket during the ceremony and reception so the camera could capture his vows and speeches. The microphone kept recording through the cake cutting. Ben had been sensing the sound when he heard an argument in the background. "I don't want to send this over regular email," he said. "Your attorney can arrange a secure transfer. I also want it clear that I've edited the original file." Alicia contacted him within 10 minutes. The next morning, we sat in her conference room with the blinds closed. Evan sat beside me. Sophie stayed with my sister because I didn't want her to hear adults debate whether her own memory was real. Alicia played the recording from a laptop. At first, there was only music and the sound of guests talking. Grant laughed somewhere close to the microphone. A glass clinked. The disc jockey announced that the couple would cut the cake. Then Danielle's voice came through. "Take the first slice to the flower girl, the little one in the blue sash." A man's voice answered. I thought there was an allergy note. Her mother makes a bigger issue of it than it is. Just give her the outside piece. The card says almond filling. She's not going to eat the whole slice. I need her included in one normal family moment without someone producing a medical bag. There was a pause. Then the man said, "Ma'am, if she has an allergy, I need to check with the banquet captain." Danielle's voice became lower, but Grant's microphone still caught it. "I'm her stepmother, I know what she can eat. Bring the plate." 20 seconds later, Grant moved closer to the cake table. The voices became clearer. Sophie asked, "Is this my safe one?" Danielle answered, "It is the same frosting." "Don't make this difficult." Then Evan shouted her name. The crash came 5 seconds later. The recording continued. Evan yelled for someone to call 911. Danielle repeatedly said he had ruined everything. Grant asked what was happening. Sophie coughed. Evan said he needed her purse. Danielle said the purse was upstairs. Evan said he had a spare. The 12-second video had ended before any of that. The raw audio kept going for 11 minutes. Alicia stopped the recording. Evan was staring at the dark laptop screen. "Can we play the part where the waiter warned her again?" he asked. We played it again. Then again. The third time, Evan covered his face and cried. It wasn't relief. I had expected relief. Instead, he cried like the recording had finally allowed him to feel how close he had come to failing. "I was right there," he said. "I was talking to one of the ushers. She could have eaten the whole thing." I moved my chair beside his. "She didn't. Because I saw the card by accident. Because you paid attention when the adults didn't." "That's not better." He was right. It wasn't better that a 14-year-old had been the most responsible person at a wedding full of adults. It was only the reason his sister was home instead of still in that hospital, or worse. Alicia sent the file to the guardian ad litem, the investigating officer, Grant's attorney, and the hotel's insurance representative. She instructed everyone to preserve the metadata and the complete recording. Grant called within an hour. This time, he didn't ask to speak to the children. "Did you hear it?" he asked. "Yes, I didn't know." "You were standing close enough that your microphone recorded it." "I was talking to people. The music was loud." "Irvan told you before the wedding. Sophie told you her medicine had been taken." "The school nurse copied you on the email." The bakery invoice listed her separate cupcake. "Which part didn't you know?" He was quiet. "I didn't know she would actually hand Sophie the cake." "You mean you didn't know how far Danielle would go? That is different." "Mara, I can't do this with you right now." "Then do it with yourself." He ended the call. That evening, Grant went to the hotel where Danielle was still staying. I know what happened only because he described it later during a meeting with the guardian. He played the recording for her. Danielle didn't deny the voice was hers. She said she believed Sophie would only eat the outer frosting. She said the server should have removed the inner layer. She said no reasonable person would expect one bite to cause such a serious reaction. Grant reminded her that the school nurse had explained exactly that risk. Danielle said the school nurse had been influenced by me. Then she said the sentence that finally reached him. "If Sophie is going to live in our house, she cannot use an allergy to control every holiday for the rest of our lives." Grant asked her to leave the hotel room. She reminded him it was their honeymoon suite. He said there would be no honeymoon. I wish I could say that was the moment everything became easy. It wasn't. Danielle hired a different attorney and argued that the recording was private and misleading. The police investigated whether her actions met the state's standard for child endangerment. Alicia warned me that knowing something was reckless didn't mean a prosecutor would choose a specific charge. The hotel investigated its own staff and placed the server on leave for ignoring the allergy warning instead of finding a supervisor. The bakery was cleared of responsibility after producing the ingredient card, delivery documents, and Danielle's signed change request. The hotel decided not to pursue Evan for the destroyed cake. Its insurer had larger concerns by then. Grant withdrew his emergency custody request. At the next family court meeting, he admitted under oath that Evan had spoken to him at least 3 times about Danielle minimizing Sophie's allergy. He admitted that he had seen the school email and the original cupcake order. He admitted he had told Evan to let him have one peaceful day. The guardian asked why. Grant looked at his hands. Because every time he raised a concern, Danielle said it proved he hated her. I was afraid that if I agreed with him, the wedding would fall apart. "So you believed Danielle?" "I believed the version that required the least from me." That was the most honest thing he had said since the wedding. The temporary parenting arrangement kept the children primarily with me. Grant received visits without Danielle present. He enrolled in an allergy management course and a co-parenting program. He also began individual therapy, not because a judge could manufacture remorse, but because the children refused to be alone with him until he understood why they no longer trusted his decisions. Danielle moved into her mother's house and communicated with Grant only through attorneys. Whether their marriage would be annulled or end in divorce depended on legal details I didn't care about. To the children, the important fact was that she wouldn't be in their father's home. Grant wanted to explain himself to Evan immediately, even didn't want an explanation. For the first 3 visits, he spoke only to his grandmother and kept Sophie within sight. Grant tried to show him the certificate from the allergy course. Evan looked at it and asked where Sophie's injector was. Grant pointed to a bright red case on the table, and the second one, Evan asked. Grant showed him the backup case in the kitchen. Only then did Evan sit down. At school, the video didn't disappear. That isn't how the internet works. Some people learned the truth. Most simply moved on to another clip. The assistant principal allowed Evan to change lunch periods. His therapist helped him prepare one answer for students who asked what happened. My sister had an allergic reaction. I gave her medicine. The rest is private. He practiced saying it without defending every second of the video. Sophie had different work to do. Her allergist taught her again that asking about ingredients wasn't rude. Her counselor helped her practice saying, I cannot eat that. Even when an adult insisted, we put her medicine in a small red pouch she chose herself. It had a cartoon fox on the front. For several weeks, she still asked Evan to inspect every meal. He always did. Then one Saturday morning, I watched her read the label on a box of granola bars, place it back on the shelf, and choose another brand. She didn't ask her brother first. Avon noticed too. He smiled, but there were tears in his eyes. 4 months after the wedding, Grant came to our house for a scheduled visit. He stood on the porch holding a cardboard bakery box. Avon went rigid when he saw it. Grant noticed and immediately set the box on the porch rail. It's from the allergy-safe kitchen Jules recommended, he said. The label is sealed. I've the ingredient list and the receipt. But we don't have to bring it inside. He handed the papers to Sophie instead of Evan. She read them slowly. Vanilla, she asked. Vanilla. No almonds. No tree nuts in the kitchen. She looked at me. I told her the decision was hers. Sophie carried the box inside. Grant stayed on the porch with Evan. I could hear them through the screen door. I keep wanting to tell you I didn't know, Grant said. But you did tell me. More than once. Evan said nothing. I thought keeping the peace made me a good father. It only meant you had to do the part I wouldn't do. You blamed me at the courthouse. I did. You said you hoped I was happy. Grant's voice broke. I remember. I wasn't trying to ruin your wedding. I know. I was trying to make sure Sophie came home. Grant covered his face for a moment. Then he nodded. Avon didn't hug him. He didn't forgive him on the porch. Real children don't finish months of fear because an adult finally finds the correct apology. But he opened the screen door and let his father come inside. We ate the vanilla cake at the kitchen table. Sophie read the label one more time before taking the first bite. Grant didn't tell her she was being dramatic. He waited. Avon sat beside her, but he didn't hold the injector in his hand. It was in the red case on the counter, exactly where every adult in the room could see it. For the first time in months, he let it stay there.